one, everyone. As parents start to get older, sometimes their kids have to make the tough call. Are they able to still live on their own? And how do you know when it's time to make that decision? And even more importantly, how do you make sure it's the right decision? Well, this morning, our first guest is here to share some tips. Please help me welcome to the show Jennifer FitzPatrick of Generations Health. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Malik.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning because I know for a lot of people, they are dealing with this right now, especially after the last year and a half. Before we talk about the different options available, I first want to ask you, what are some of the signs that, parents of older parents need to be looking out for when trying to decide, do they still live by themselves or do we need to bring them either with us or move them to a facility?
The big one for a lot of people is memory. If you notice that your loved one is forgetting where they live, forgetting your name, forgetting who the president is, that is a sign that some type of intervention needs to happen. Another one is falls. If falls are increasing, that is frequently a sign. And also, you mentioned all of the craziness in the last year and a half, isolation. If your loved one is really isolated, hasn't been connecting with others, it might be time to look at what a senior living community might be able to do for them.
So true. And what's good is that you're the author of a book. It's called Cruising Through Caregiving, where you talk a lot about, being a caregiver and some advice for them. For people out there who are saying, maybe it's time that I move my loved one into a facility. I know there are some different options. What are some of those different options?
Well, I think most people think about a nursing home first because that's the one that's been around the longest. And that's really generally for people who are really unwell, or it's for somebody that needs, say, short-term rehab because they broke a hip or something like that. But more often, their loved one's going to need a senior living community, like an assisted living, which the person has their own apartment and they get help with medicine. Maybe there's meals there. In a lot of cases, it's much like a college campus. The other option is the CCRC, Continuing Care Retirement Community, or Life Care Retirement Community, which includes an independent living apartment. Assisted living also includes nursing home as well. So you pay a very large entrance fee, but in most cases, in most contracts, you never have to leave. And you might spend the rest of your life in the independent section, or maybe every few years you're moving to a different level of care.
Very interesting. And I see some other options here, home care or adult daycare, which I did not know adult daycare existed. Good to know that's an option as well. But like this list right here, there are so many different options out there. How do you determine the best one for your loved one?
I think it's really important first, especially if your loved one does not have cognitive impairment, you've got to remember they're a grown up, they're an adult. They get to have a say in what they want for themselves. So don't try to make decisions for that person. On the other hand, if that person has dementia, particularly advanced dementia, you're probably going to have to get more comfortable with taking over the reins. You don't want to let somebody who has dementia captain the ship.
So true. And another tip that you have is when you're trying to figure out what option to go with, you say, do the six census tour. Please tell us a little bit about what that is.
So if you're looking around, whether it's home care, whether it's nursing home, whether it's assisted living, obviously you want to use your five senses, your sense of smell, your sense of taste the food. You're going to take a look. What do the other residents look like? Do the expression on people's faces? Do they look satisfied, happy, content? Listen for how the staff are interacting with the residents. But the last is really your gut feeling. Do you feel like your loved one, or is your loved one feeling like he or she could be at home here? As far as your non-negotiables, think about what are maybe two or three things you absolutely have to have. And for some people, it might be, I need to be within 5 miles of my daughter. Don't look at any community until you know what your budget is, because you don't want to fall in love with a service you can't afford.
So true. And for some people, they may not go down the facility option. They go down the you took care of me growing up. Now it's my turn to take care of you. They become the caregiver. Let's be honest, it can be hard for some people out there. What is some advice that you can offer them?
Well, the first thing is that there's not one way to be a good caregiver. There's just not. There are many possibilities. And in cruising through caregiving, I have a whole chapter on think really hard before you move your loved one in, because in some families it works out really well. In other families it really doesn't. You have to think about not just, okay, I love my mom or my dad or my grandfather. What is their personality like? What is your personality like? If you have three teenage daughters and grandmom's going to have to now share the bathroom with them in the mornings, is that going to be a challenge? So how much is your loved one going to contribute to the family budget, if anything? Because it can become really expensive. So I don't think any caregiver out there, there's not one way to do it right. There's so many wonderful options available to you.
So true. And going back to the facilities, it's good that we do our research as well, but what can facilities do to make sure that that stigma that may be around nursing homes is not correct?
Well, I think especially after what's happened the last year and a half, they have to be so transparent about why of any policy that they might put into place. They want to acknowledge that they're not perfect. They mess up sometimes, and the ones that are most successful will say, "Hey, we're not perfect, but communicate with us. Tell us what you need. If your needs aren't being met, you got to be really clear and tell us what could we do differently, what could we do to make the experience better." Most good organizations are going to be really open to your feedback.
So true. Some really great tips this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer. And hey, for more great information from Jennifer, you can check out her website, generationshealth.com, or find her on Instagram at Generations Health. She also has a Facebook page. Also, check out her book, Cruising Through Caregiving, for more caregiving tips. All right, everyone, a lot more to come. Stick with us.